Hello all, welcome home. It is SuperMex Nation on a, I would say very special, but a kickoff evening for a political roundtable with some friends of mine, SuperMex and friends, the Super Friends, we'll call it that. But we're going to be doing on Sundays now, and I've been promising this and alluding to this for quite some time now, but it is a Sunday afternoon talk show having to do with basically the political escapades and roundup of the day and the week preceding, mostly and then back to, but mostly national back to state and local. And again, we have ability to mix it up as we need to, but we've done a good job of, and I'll just be blatant and honest about it, putting together groups of people, myself and friends, that are representative of a diverse body of the country. And so it's not just entirely diversity, right? But it is different looking people. We have, it's going to be female and male. It's going to be different looks in terms of ethnicity, different age groups. Want a cross section of what this country is as we talk about and get views on what's going on in the world today, in these United States of ours, especially now, as we need to kind of separate the chaff from what the meat is. And that's quite literally where we are today. So today is a kickoff of the SuperMex Political Roundtable. We'll come up with a cool name for the show in general, but it's basically on the SuperMex International network of shows and programs that is going to be designed specifically to educate and inform people in a variety of ways on everything from political to social, cultural, and a variety of other things that I think you kind of have to have in your wheelhouse as a good American, so you can make good decisions for yourself and your family. That's the intent. So tonight is a kickoff. I'll be joined by two guests tonight, and we'll introduce them shortly. Would say real quick, so we did yesterday, I was real, and it is cultural, right? But today is, and tonight is Oscar night, and Liana Jean, who is a guest tonight, and I did a show yesterday, an Oscar special, hazarding our picks as to who's going to win the Oscars tonight in 6 of the main categories, all the 4 acting categories, and then of course Best Director, Best Picture. So that's going on right now. I just left home. My wife and I are watching red carpet stuff while I got some other stuff done. And then we're going to head home and check out the Oscars for tonight, because I will say this before we get started on our political plate. It is important, and I've had to take a step back myself, and most of you guys know this, that have been with me for some time, going back to a year or two ago when I was mostly and exclusively on radio. It is not good to entirely feed yourself a diet of nothing but political and heavy material that will engulf you, and it will allow you, if anything, not allow you, but put you in a bubble where you don't see outside of that bubble. And it is not healthy, I will say that. I've watched, in some cases, way too much coverage, way too much political. And so it has been good over the last month and a half, from the holidays into now, to get into other aspects of who we are. Okay, we are music, we are art, we are entertainment, we're education, we're living regular jobs, living regular lives, getting involved in your community. That's all essential to what I believe living the good life is. Go back to Socrates, Aristotle, Plato, and beyond in other cultures. But it is important that you vary your intellectual interests. That's extremely important to me, and so we're not going to stop doing that. We're going to continue to do that. However, we will not ignore pressing matters, pressing issues, such as topic today, which is the coverage of, in this case, the conclusion of, and in our case, an analysis of the impeachment process that is wrapped up going back to this past week. And we're going to have a really, really heavy discussion on what that means, and we're going to break it down in some good form, so you come out tonight after we're done with a better understanding of what just happened. You have opinions, we do also, and we're going to share those with each other on the show. But it is extremely important that you base your opinions and your views on facts and a good analysis of what is the truth. Don't just simply listen to someone, and I do this all the time, but don't just simply listen to someone and take that as the gospel. I have always, when talking about political or contentious issues, warned you in advance with the caveat to don't just take my word for it. Fact check me and go find contrary opinion, contrary views. Don't just take my word for it. I will not lie to you. But to confirm, and here's the beauty of it, I'm telling you to go check other people so that when you find out I didn't lie to you, you're going to believe me and trust me even more. and what we do on this show and this program and the network and family of them. It's important that you go out, fact find on your own, and then when you realize that we're spitting the truth at you, then you're going to confirm with us and you're going to trust us that much more as we go forward. Okay, so that's SuperMex Political Roundtable that we're going to begin tonight on a Sunday afternoon, later afternoon into the early evening as we get ready for the Oscars a little bit. But I've got with me my partner in crime, Dr. Manhattan, Dr. Miller. Doctor, I'm going to do that to you again, man. I'm going to do that to you again. Most of you guys know Darren. He's been with us on a variety of shows going back for a number of months, if not a year, close to getting there. For a while now, and Darren and I are friends. We've gotten to know each other through political and other things, but we have like mind. I don't know if we agree on everything, but we agree on a lot.
Close.
Yeah, we agree on a lot, and definitely on the method of how we do things. Mm-hmm. Conducting yourself in a good fashion, being fair, honest, and open. That should be universal, I believe. And then so coming to us also from Utah, and a professor of English Lit at Snow College in Utah is Liana Jean Manabog, my new crime partner, young lady who's very bright and gifted and knowledgeable on a variety of topics. And Darren, we're gonna have to do this. Liana is much, much younger than us.
That's okay.
So we need
people every day.
Exactly. So we need to take advantage of her experiences and her viewpoints, because they may be different than yours and mine, if not just for the fact that she's a lady, but also because she's a younger lady than us. And we will begin to add more people as well to the program that, again, provide us a wide and disparate look and approach of opinions and views to share out what we're doing on our shows. So thank you both for being here. Much appreciated. I would say it's like SuperMex Political Roundtable, right? SuperMex and friends. And then you got to be one of the super friends, right? You got to pick your super friend. But so here we go tonight. And so we're going to get you with basically a quick 1 hour or less program with nuts and bolts on the impeachment process. So both of the guests tonight, the co-hosts, are well aware of what we're talking about, a contentious item and issue, difficult for people to internalize without taking a hardline opinion or view one way or the other. So when we do this, guys, we're going to do it in this fashion. So there are 2 articles of impeachment. We need to analyze the process, if not just the process, but what happened with each of those 2 articles, and then also our conclusions as to what happened and where we go, because that's always more significant to me as a historian. I'm always concerned with what this means for later and going forward, what this is going to look like, not just for me, but for family, for region, for state, for country. Those are extremely critical items for me. So I'll start off by saying, and no obligation to either of you, because I don't expect you to, but I watched every single minute of the impeachment hearings in the House. I watched all of the testimonies by the different witnesses that they brought forward. I watched all of the Senate hearings, if we want to call them that. I won't call it a trial because there were no witnesses. We'll get to that in a second, but I watched all of that, and I'm a little over-radiated when it comes to the nuclear fallout of impeachment. There's my pun for the night. So it was quite a bit, and it was staggering in the process, but I did learn some things that maybe I would not have known. So I'm well informed, and I have my opinions and views, but that, again, it's not singular that I should have like the expertise and tell everybody else what they are, what happened, what didn't happen, etc. So let's start by doing this. So Article 1 was abuse of power. We're going to tackle each of the 2 articles in a different form. So let's do this. Ladies first on a good evening Oscar night, because I know Liana's going to watch Oscars right after like I am. So abuse of power. And I will say this, I don't know to what degree you got to watch or internalize information, Liana, but I'll just give you the generic run of the table here and say, in terms of abuse of power and the charge that the president took advantage of and tried to, and we can get colorful with the language, but tried to shake down or extort or get something out of the president of Ukraine for personal benefit, where do you sit at in your view of what happened with the charge of abuse of power?
Yeah. So
So I feel like it's really hard to split up both of the charges because on the one hand, like as world leaders, you are going to be interacting with each other, asking each other to look into certain instances, right? On the other hand, there is a definite line with regards to what you're allowed to ask versus if there's any leverage behind what you're asking. And if you're leveraging a relationship that's going to be, an alliance or fiscal and policy, anything like that. And so I feel like we have the situation where he's talking to the president of Ukraine about Biden and his son. And, the big charge is the whole quid pro quo, right? Was it attached to any aid that we were giving Ukraine? But then the second article is dealing with, and I know I'm jumping ahead, but I feel like they're connected. You can't divide them. This idea of, obstruction of Congress with regards to bringing in other pieces of evidence, other witnesses. And while I do believe that we need to have a speedy trial, we want to get that done as quickly as possible. When it comes to something like this, or we do have the leader of our country who is being investigated for potentially nefarious acts, we shouldn't be just rushing through and ignoring submission of other, other witnesses, other pieces of evidence. And I do think it's problematic that they were actively fought against, basically bringing in these other, I guess, angles to the story, if that makes sense. So it's hard for me to divide those.
Yeah, so I'm gathering that you weren't averse or against, the timeline. You weren't as concerned with how quick it was going. You just wanted to do it right. Is that accurate?
I think that's how, the thing with politics that's tricky is we do have timelines in place, right? And they worry about that for things like gerrymandering, where you can sit and just pontificate for forever.
Correct.
In order to let certain things expire. However, I do think it's problematic to just push things through to meet a timeline. It needs to be done well, so that by the time things are done, we can say beyond a shadow of a doubt that people didn't get off on just a technicality or a loophole, right?
Right. So I'm gonna kick this to Darren now, but what I'm gonna get at, and I'm thinking he may be here too, because I am as well. Obviously, when it comes to witnesses, John Bolton, Mick Mulvaney, and I'll be on record as saying, I wanted to see damn Rudy Giuliani on the damn stand too, by the way. Who knows more than him other than the president? So I'm gonna guess you're okay with witnesses. You're okay with getting to the fact-finding, accurate, real business of what the hell went on and who knew what. Correct?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
I'm of the mindset that all leaders, I don't think I've been involved in an organization where the leader, whoever the head is, has not stretched the limits of their power, who have gone right up to the level of abusing their power. But usually it's based on timelines, based on getting something done, rather than going back to the body to get permission. So that's part of leadership. My issue with the abuse of power is that when you go over the line, how are you held accountable? And I think that in this particular case, there is no question that our current president
went over the line.
My frustration with this is there's no accountability.
Right.
And what do they say?
Absolute power corrupts.
There you
absolutely.
Go. And so I think that we're in a situation now because of the absence of accountability for the abuses that have been proved. What's going to happen next? And I would agree with the House managers that says they presented the case about that he went over the line, and unfortunately now the Congress, the senators part of it did not hope there was no accountability with that.
Yeah. So let's hold there for 1 second, and I think we're gonna put a nice little bow on this part, and let's hope. Or not hope, but let's see if we all agree here. I think there was no question because Lamar Alexander, a bastion of conservatism in his state and in the Senate for decades, by the way, a really hard right Republican conservative. Even Marco Rubio to a degree, almost uniformly, regardless of where you sit with Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, and let's put Mitt Romney on a side for a second here, but more than a handful, clearly stipulated, and I'm talking about Republicans in the Senate now, more than a handful clearly stipulated and said openly that, and in Lamar Alexander's case, he said openly that there was clearly no more need for further evidence because the House managers proved beyond a doubt that he indeed committed the act and the abuse. And then so it ended up being, and I'm going to get back to it in a second, but it ended up being clear that it was an abuse of power. Then the question becomes, what is the consequence, which is where you're going.
I think the other part that goes on with the abuse of power, though, is why was the power abused? Was it abused for the betterment of our country, the betterment of our nation,
or personal interest,
or was it for personal interest? And I think that it was clear through the trial, through the impeachment manager's part of it, that the abuses of power that happened were clearly for
personal
reasons, personal political reasons.
Right. So I think we're kind of uniform in saying that, Liana, and jump in here if I'm incorrect for you, but no question, we needed to hear from the players, and I thought it was laughable / comical that the defense from the White House, which I'm going to write this down for a second. Watch this. I did have a problem with the fact that White House counsel was in this trial arguing on a personal level for the personal interests of the president.
Correct.
Not acting as our paid employee, because White House counsel is paid by the American people. I had a problem with that. But it was no question that we wanted to hear more. I think we're uniform there. And I think most Americans were. The numbers were up above 75% that the American people wanted to hear from witnesses and the people that were in the room and that knew what was going on. So I think that's kind of uniform. I don't think I'm not out of bounds with either of you in that particular case. And so when it came down to, the speedy trial that Liana was alluding to, accurately, by the way, because you could tell it was on a fast track timeline to get it done out of the way, because I'll say it, the American people don't have an attention span that extends beyond, weeks of a trial. And once it's done and killed, they move on to the next, dumpster fire that they can bring up and draw the attention away from impeachment now to something else. So I do have issue, and I'll say this to close this part one up, the abuse of power. I don't think either of us or either of you two are saying that it wasn't clear that there was definitely an abuse of power. I think we all in agreement there, right? Including Republicans in the Senate agreed that it was clearly an abuse of power because it was not in the interest of the public. It was in self-interest to benefit himself in the coming election and to damage his opponent, which, by the way, he's kind of done.
With some of the conservative brothers that I stay in contact with, the other part, the problem with the abuse of power is that it's not illegal. It's not a violation of penal code.
It's not a statute.
It's not a statute, but it is illegal in the framework of the rules in which the power lies. So in this conversation that we're having right now, there's mutual rules that we've established in our three-way conversation here. If I break those because I wind up with all the, I'm trying to take the power,
right?
Then what's the recourse? SuperMex is going to kick me out of it.
Well, have you guys heard that quote by Senator Rubio?
In this particular case,
and I'll say this, and you know that,
right?
Because if you understand that, then that limits you from doing the wrong, correct?
And that's the part that really, really, really troubles me about this impeachment trial, is that there was a clear evidential trail that he abused power for personal gain. Yes, it's not criminal, but it did violate the rules of the presidencies and the traditions of our presidency, but he's not being held accountable for it.
Right. I want to refute something, and then Liana, I'll bump back to you in a second here, but I want to lay down something as a marker, an intellectual marker for people listening tonight that watch this, okay? And this is serious. For those that don't know, there was no Constitution up until the late 1780s. It was the Articles of Confederation.
Correct.
Okay, so here's the other thing. There was no uniform code of justice for the United States. There was not a canon of law that was set down as our judicial system.
Correct.
When the Constitution was created. So the term abuse of power was meant to be broad and generalized as when you see somebody violating the public trust in position, in a seat, in a political seat or position of power. So when I heard, and I don't know if you guys heard this, but there were people saying, well, he didn't break the law or he didn't do this or that. That was irrelevant. That's actually, it doesn't matter, because abuse of power was stipulated and coined before there was a judicial system or a code of canon law that were violations of statute. Okay, and by the way, and I will say this, he did violate law. He violated the Federal Impoundment Act that they instituted right after Nixon.
But remember, that was not part of there was only 2 impeachment
Articles
yeah, written against him. They didn't include those.
No, they didn't.
Right.
But I'm just saying, like, for the general populace that was,
gotcha.
meaning the people that support Trump ad nauseum, they were saying, well, he didn't break any laws, and that's irrelevant. And I said, it isn't, because abuse of power is not that, because I've just pointed out, for those of you guys out there in the world, that wasn't necessary. There's no threshold that says he has to violate a federal law.
For impeachment purposes.
Because, I mean, I think we all understand this. Just because you're not breaking a law doesn't mean you're doing something right or wrong. You can do something evil or malicious without violating federal statutes. Okay, but I will say, for the record, in this case, the president violated multiple statutes. He did break the law. Liana, you want to jump in here on this?
Yeah, well, so there was a quote that I wanted to ask you guys about that Florida Senator Marco Rubio said in a Medium post, and he said,
yeah, I saw that.
Just because actions meet a standard of impeachment doesn't mean it is in the best interest of the country to remove a president from office, which I think is a really interesting quote that we maybe should play around discussing, because
parsing words,
there are a lot of implications to that.
Yeah, right. So that quote, I mean, that kind of gets to the heart of it, because that was their argument. He's parsing words, is what I was saying, is that he knows that he did it, but it's on us to decide, like, morally or ethically, if it rises to the standard of impeachment.
So, but in that case, why do we have impeachment? Well, I mean, that is exactly why.
We'll conclude. Like, in our conclusion, we're going to get to that. I promise you will. And if not, remind me, because we're getting to that. I mean, that it's repercussion and it's consequence. That's ultimately, because that's the nature of a judicial system. You can't do evil things or bad things without paying a price or a penalty to deter others from doing the same thing.
Yeah, if our current president was in his 2nd term and could not run again, does it make, I mean, at that particular time, would impeachment be okay by what you said, by the quote by Rubio? Would it be okay now? Would that be in the best interest of our country?
I tell you what,
to remove him? I mean, that's just.
I'm going to be cynical. I'm going to be cynical, but Rubio's doing that because he thinks he's going to be president someday, and he's taking care of himself.
Yeah,
true. He is. He thinks he's going to be president. So let's halt there. We're going to bump forward. The second, even though yours is linked, Liana, they're both linked, right? Because I agree with you. They are. They're both linked. So the second article of impeachment that the House brought forward was obstruction of Congress. So I'm going to make a comment, and then I'm going to let Liana and you go, but watch how I'm going to do this. I actually believe that the second article is far more dangerous, deadly, and consequential. The second one, for me, as an historian, as a student of the Constitution, someone raised in this country, I'll fight and die for this country. I absolutely believe that this one is the most dangerous and the most deadly, not just to the United States, but to the body of how we run our political system. I absolutely believe that. Go ahead. Obstruction of Congress. Liana.
Well, I mean, I think, okay, so let me pull back a little bit and give some context here. I think there's a trend in politics, especially with maybe like my generation and demographic, where we're just super disillusioned with politicians and politics altogether. I don't want to identify as Republican. I don't want to identify as Democrat. I'm tired of the games that both sides play altogether.
And I'm tired of that's why you're on the show, because we need to hear that view right there.
Yeah, well, and it's not an unusual view now. I think if you talk to a lot of my peers, you're going to hear the same thing. People are really just tired. And so I think it's speaking to a larger underlying problem that, yes, this issue of obstruction of Congress is a big thing. However, I think the bigger problem is the fact that Congress plays these games anyway, so we don't feel like we can trust either side, really. We're kind of just done with the whole establishment, if that makes sense.
Yeah, right. And so I'm going to guess that, like, it doesn't matter if it's Republican or Democrat. It just matters that it's wrong.
Right. It's not along party lines whatsoever. I don't care about supporting a party. And in fact, I think it's really stupid that on ballots you can just walk in and vote along party lines the minute you pull the ballot. That like absolves you of any responsibility that you have to go and research individual candidates, individual motions on the ballot. You should have to go in and do that research and not just be able to default to letting somebody else essentially pool your power into theirs. I don't like that idea whatsoever.
No, I think you're on the right track, because I hear that a lot. And Darren and I are around younger, like much younger, younger than you even, teens and 20s, and I still am too, because of the things that I do. I'm always around young guys. And that right there, I'm gonna get back to your point, hits the nail on the head big time. The fact that it's almost an absolution, an absolving of responsibility to learn, be well informed, to know the differences in what you're voting on or the people that you're voting on. That's critical. So people just go in there, and it allows them to not have to do any work intellectually. They don't have to worry. They just walk in there and say, I'm voting all this because I'm blue or I'm red, which I think is absolutely, it's intellectually weak to not have to do the work of knowing the differences between parties and individual politicians. So your point, I mean, and I know Darren will agree with me on this one, it's that younger people are thinking in those terms, and they're concerned that you don't have to, I'm not just going to go there and vote for a D or an R just because that's in front of their name. I'm going to vote for who I want to based on who's good for me and my people, my country, my region. You agree?
I think part of it, though, goes back to your generation was part of No Child Left Behind. And as we were doing things in the education system, they didn't worry about the process of how you got to the right answer. It was all about the right answer. And I think that we have taken that mindset and turned it on to the political side. It's all about winners and losers. It's not about what's right, what's best. It's about winners and losers.
Right.
And they've turned our political game has turned into a contest. This second article, I agree with you. Because of the three branches of government that we have, the judicial, the executive, and the legislative, this obstruction of Congress that we saw, that was proved, is all but eliminating one of the arms of government.
Correct.
Turning it into an executive.
Oversight.
Yeah, turning it into an executive and the judicial with no oversight from the people that we put in office to represent our interests.
All of us grow up, and I know you do too, Liana, with the concept or the knowledge, and I'll say this quick term, everybody knows it, checks and balances. Mm-hmm. We just, in essence, watched, and this was I was going to earlier with this as I front-loaded you guys, we just watched in real time as one branch of government, or at least half of that branch, the legislative half, the Senate and the House, the Senate literally ceded over their authority and power of oversight over the executive branch. They willingly gave their own power.
I don't know if I would agree with gave.
Well, the Senate did.
Oh, the Senate. Well, yeah, but
that's what I'm saying. One half.
I got you.
One half.
Okay.
The Senate did. The House did their job.
Here's the other most dangerous part about that also. The judicial part of it, how do those members of that judicial branch get there?
They're appointed. They're appointed.
They're appointed from the executive.
Correct.
And now you've got an executive and a judicial, which is basically locked, in stride with
becoming
one
more ideologically in lockstep,
Mm-hmm.
kind of like what Liana was getting to, where we may get to a point, and I'm going to say this, if it were Democrat or Republican, what if there's a judicial branch that almost uniformly and entirely votes in lockstep with the executive? Mm-hmm. We've got a problem.
Or against the executive. Could be against them as well. Could be a situation where they're lockstep 100% against them.
Without impartiality.
I totally agree with what Liana is saying, though. I think that and how do we do it? That's the question. But I think that our political system is at a crossroads now. How do we continue to move in the same direction that we're doing? I don't know. As you're saying, we got a whole, you're millennial, correct? I'm assuming?
Mm-hmm. I'm a millennial, yeah.
So millennials, and then the two generations that are behind you are just become the largest
voting block
when they get to be voters.
Correct.
Not all of them are voting yet, but your generation and two behind you are the largest voting block that's coming up. And if you're turned off to the political process, which I hear all the time also from my sons who are both millennials, that they don't want to be a Democrat, they don't want to be a Republican, they just, Daddy, tell me who to vote for. No, I'm not going to tell you. You can do something.
Go do the work.
Yeah, go do the work. But I agree with you. So what's going to happen now when we've got the body, the people who make up our all three branches of government that getting turned off to the system? That means that we're going to have some type of revolution or some type of change. What is that going to happen? Is it going to be simple articles that we put in place, the amendments that we put in place? Mm-hmm. Is that how we're going to change it, or is it time that we totally look at maybe revamping? I don't know.
So let's get to more conclusion and then what forward thinking, like where we're going, right? That's gonna. But in terms of wrapping up, Article 2, which was obstruction. I've kind of already said a little bit of why, and my rationale as to why I think it's so much singularly more important. I'll say this, that a president or an executive that commits an impeachable offense or conducts himself, and here's a term, I'll give you guys one, I don't know if you know this, but there is such a term in the military. It's called conduct unbecoming.
Oh, yeah. Conduct
unbecoming an officer, conduct unbecoming a non-commissioned officer. It in essence, what I'm watching is conduct unbecoming the commander-in-chief. Yeah. And I won't even get into all the reasons why on the military end, but in just this one case. You will have presidents, because we've had it done already. And I think we all know the simple rationale of the kid with the hand in the cookie jar. If you don't, penalize that child for putting his hand in the cookie jar, what's he going to do? Mm-hmm. He's going to continue to do the same, behavior that he's been doing.
And come up with more creative ways of doing it.
Exactly. And since I've already done that, I can do that and one more, mm-hmm. and one more. Mm-hmm. So here's my point, is that you're going to have executives that push the boundary, the envelope of presidential executive power. That's the very nature of power. Absolute power corrupts absolutely, yes? So you're going to have that anyway, but I'm going to say it again. That's manageable and can be controlled if you have three equal branches of government providing checks and balances on each other. But it's not manageable and controllable, and this is where I'm going to go in a second with both of you, the dangerous point that we are now, where one branch, and I'm going to say half of that branch because the House did something, the Senate did not, one branch, a half of that branch, willingly, knowingly gave another branch, the executive branch, the ability to do everything that he's accused of and more. So in addition, and I'll put the facts on the table for our viewers, there was no evidence in documentation provided, emails, text messages, official documents, no witnesses there were loads of witnesses that were sought after by the House, not by the Senate. And the president unilaterally and uniformly refused to comply with anything that Congress asked for. Blanket and an obligatory defiance of oversight. And he got away with it. So going forward, he can get away with whatever the hell he wants because he's not going to do anything that is asked, which just absolutely shatters. And I hate to say this because I've been pretty disgusted. I haven't shared with this either with either two of you, but I've been in a really not good mood over the last week because I'm afraid, generally afraid and concerned about where we go forward, which is what we're going to get to now to finish up what we're doing here. I am concerned because the president now has the ability to not comply with Congress at all, to not provide documents, to not provide witnesses, basically to be unchecked and to do whatever the hell he wants. That scares the hell out of me. And so that's why I think that the second article is the far more consequential of the two. Because if you have the second, you can curb the first. They are tied, back to your point, Liana, your point. They are tied in that fashion.
Yeah, well,
but
I think there's a bigger problem, though. It's not just the fact that Congress was obstructed. It's that I feel like there's a bigger problem. I don't feel like we can trust Congress in the first place right now because everybody's too busy worrying about protecting their self-interest and maintaining an ability to be reelected. I do think it's a big problem that we have career politicians. I do think Congress should have term limits. because then you are able to vote in accordance with conscience, where you're not necessarily trying to just maintain a voter base. And again, I think
more
I want
people.
to talk big
I think
picture.
more
I don't want to look at all the weeds of it all, because I mean the weeds are there. They're important for us to consider. The details do matter, but I think it matters much more that we're looking at big picture implications. And so obstruction of Congress, yeah, that's a problem. But what's more of a problem is that we have people in Congress who are worried about staying there because it's a paycheck and they can push through agendas.
So what I was going to
That
say
makes
was,
sense.
I think more people than ever before, and back to Darren's point earlier about the body of voters that is coming, are going to be with you, on that rationale. There is a bigger problem. I think we both agree with you that there is a bigger problem. But with the context of those two articles, it's like, get what you can, because hopefully something gets done. But I do believe that it's going to be a problem going forward with people your age and younger, where they just don't believe in anything in terms of government. They just say, the hell with this, it's all corrupt. And then where do we go? Where do we go with it?
No, and I agree with you also, Liana, but I have an example here in California when we just blanketly went in and threw out term limits here in the state of California with our state legislators. It threw us into kind of a disarray. And so if we were to do something along the lines that you're suggesting, we got to make sure that we have a plan of action going into that. Just taking away term limits from a system that has always had no term limits, we got to be careful with that, because I think unfortunately, our politicians, as you said, are not necessarily the most honest and trustworthy people. And power corrupts that. And so I think that any way we can diminish the power that goes along with our position and get it back to the service side of it, which is what is the way that it's intended, I think it's going to be better for us. But I agree with you. And some of the candidates, at least on the Democratic side, presidential candidates have been talking about term limits as well.
What I'm interested to see, and we'll see, if a Democrat were to win, well, let me back that up. I'm going to back that up. If I were president, like this coming cycle, if I ran and I were president, I would come back and correct all this mess. I'm going to say it, I would place, because the executive has to agree to, because they sign the laws. It's going to take a president to willingly cap the ability that they now have, because if you don't, it only increases. So I'm going to say it on record. If I were president, I would limit and restrict the growing power of the executive. Because if no one does that, how can I trust the next guy or woman that comes along to do what's right? Donald Trump has already committed crimes, period. How do we expect the next guy or gal to not also commit those same crimes?
We've opened Pandora's box. You know, you can always work to get Pandora back in there, but whatever damage Pandora does while it's out, it's going to be left behind, even if you wind up getting him back in the box. And so that's what I mean. We just have to be very, very, very thoughtful. And there's lots of examples that we can come across. I'm just familiar with what happened here in California. But there's lots of other examples that we need to make sure we take into consideration as we move to whatever the next system.
Well, because we've asked, and we'll finish up along this vein, but we've talked about, so clearly, I mean, I'm going to say it again, he committed crimes, he abused power, and he obstructed Congress. Those are all not all in debate. It was just about what happens now. Mm-hmm. So clearly, I'm saying I'm not optimistic that anything's going to happen between now and election.
Well, the Republicans, I shouldn't say, the conservative side of the ledger says that the ultimate test is in November when we have our election.
I know. But the problem is, he is...
and the process has been jaded. It's been tampered with. It's been, poisoned.
Does anybody, let's do this. Does anybody between of the three of us, does anyone here believe that Donald Trump will not do something to try to win the election that may not be illegal? I think he will. I think he's doing it now.
He will, but I think that that's even bigger than that. It's more insidious than that. There are other entities, not just him, but there's other factions. So take into consideration.
No, you're right. But we pay him. But we pay him.
Here's the other part also that just came up. They gave that, not the prayer breakfast, but his what was it, that other speech he gave right after the prayer breakfast?
In the East Wing, in the East Room.
That was covered on all the national channels.
I know.
that wasn't about politics of our country.
No, that was about ripping his opponents.
Right.
That was about saying bullshit in the East Room of the White House on national TV. I couldn't believe it. I was like staggered. I'm like, what the hell's going on here?
Here's the point that I was trying to make with that is you're saying that Donald Trump will do anything to keep him elected. There's other entities, national media outlets. I forget what the guy's name was. I think it was a CBS head that says Donald Trump is not good, but he's good for business. So there's other entities that are cashing in on this cash cow they've got right now called Donald Trump, the 45th president of the United States, who are also going to want to see him have another four years because it's good for him. And so that's the part the insidious behind the curtain type of thing that I'm worried about is who else is going to be on board to change and screw with our elections.
I've got one quick one before we finish up on that part. So I don't normally do this because I don't like doing it on air, but this goes to what we were saying earlier about people need to be informed. People need to have facts, and people need to have information to make the good decisions. So I had somebody responded on here saying, you talk in general terms, Ayala, he's committed crimes, but not one of you give a specific crime. I'm going to give you a specific crime. The Federal Impoundment Act. It stipulates that an executive, the president, cannot take money federally appropriated and passed by the Congress, specified and earmarked for a specific thing. In this case, federal military aid to the Ukraine, and hold that up or hold it and do what he wants with it. That's a crime. That is a crime. Okay, in addition, it is a crime to take and barter a thing of value. One for one, what was talked about, the quid pro quo. It is a federal crime to basically to quid pro quo, take a thing of value, a White House visit, and by the way, White House visits are very expensive. White House visits and federally appropriated congressional money. Those are both crimes, and those were both proved. So I hope, I don't know where you'll be with it. You may not want to hear it anyway, but there were crimes committed, and they're in documentation. Just because someone isn't penalized for a crime doesn't mean that the crime wasn't committed. And again, back to our earlier point, abuse of power in the Constitution doesn't stipulate because there were no such thing as a canon of federal law when the Constitution was created. So you don't have to have a crime, but he did commit multiple crimes, and I just gave them to you. I hope that helps you. Okay, so let's we're going to get closer to wrap up here. Leon, I need a little more on your take, from your perspective, on how you see the impeachment, thing done and where it goes. And I'm not just talking about the election, but you're speaking to the larger issue of a lack of trust and a lack of belief in our system. Because most politicians, I won't say all, by the way, I don't like blanketing people. That's one of the reasons why we have a lot of the negative talk. You know what I mean? We have a lot of negative talk because, Democrats don't do this and Republicans are that. And then we blanket everybody. I know both good Republicans and I know good Democrats. I may not agree with everybody on everything, but there are good people. I think they're becoming more in the minority than ever before. But your larger issue is that the average politician, most, are there out of making sure they're staying in position, they get reelected, and they have the ability to continue to do what they want to do. So for you, and say your age and younger, what do you see coming out of this impeachment process where there was no trial, there were no witnesses, it was a joke, we knew it wasn't going to be a trial. I think everybody knew it, and it was a joke. So where do you feel, or what do you feel, and where do you stand with what's coming in the future?
I think we're going to start to see a big shift in this two-party system, quite frankly. I do think we're going to start to have a third party or even a fourth. I think we're going to start to see a shift because right now we do have checks and balances in that we have, the different branches of government, and we do have checks and balances in the sense that we have two parties that are supposed to counterbalance each other. However, I think, again, looking at life, we know that it's not binary, right? And so I think the more diverse grouping that we have to pull viewpoints from, the better. Two, I also think it's problematic how, there have been plenty of articles talking about how we are at a point where we have not been divided as a nation since the Civil War. And I think
Accurate.
that's problematic because I agree with you, Rich, when you say that we need, I don't like blanket statements either. I fully disagree with saying all people do this or all people don't do that. We need to have a facilitation of more open dialogue where people are willing to talk to each other despite knowing they're coming from totally different viewpoints, and actually take the time to listen to each other, because that dialogue is what our nation is founded on. And if we're not willing to talk to each other, then we're not actually able to make any of the progress that we need to make, right? If any one group is uncomfortable speaking out and saying like, hey, this is my current thought, then they don't actually have the chance to listen to somebody else, right? And vice versa. And so I think that's the problem, is that we have polarization of viewpoints. We have people only ending up talking to people who agree with each other. And then likewise, we see that playing out in the political arena, right? Where people are voting along party lines because they're not willing to talk to each other. And I mean, we can't ignore the fact that there's you guys know this saying, power corrupts absolutely, right? So clearly we need those checks and balances in place. And we have to understand human nature. It ties into a much larger philosophical conversation. But I think the first steps are going to be, in a political arena, I think term limits need to happen. I think we need to have more than just a two-party system. And then in the greater sphere, I think we need to have better facilitation of conversations where it isn't impugning character to disagree with somebody else.
Which, by the way, and I'll plug myself here for a little bit, but which was the nature of why I started doing this. Going back when I was on radio and it was all unilateral, I would give my opinions and views, and then I'd have to go answer questions later from people that's like, oh, how about this and how about that? And I would do that, and I was like, why don't we have a format where we can have different looking people, different genders, different regions, different geographies, different ages, and then just kind of put it all on the table, have a discussion, and then we walk away and like, okay, I didn't know that, or I had not heard that opinion or view, and now maybe I can make some decisions for myself as to what I heard. Maybe I don't agree with the guy, but at least he gave me his piece, and now I can make my decision too. That's in essence what we were doing. And so I will say for the three of us and for what we have going forward, that'll be the nature of our show, this political roundtable, where we may not all agree on everything. Like, for instance, you're for term limits. I kind of am. I just don't know how it looks.
I got you.
I guess. You know what I mean?
I'm with both of you.
Yeah. I will say this, because there are people that have been in office forever, and you've got a Snow's College chance in hell of getting rid of them.
Well, here's one.
Did you hear that?
I
was trying. Here's one of the elements I'd like to add on to something that Leanna said also, is that I agree with her about the power. But I think now, in our current system, in our current society, you can substitute the word money for power. Money, I think, has also a huge corrupting factor, in what goes on in our political system. And if we could nullify the monetary part of what goes on with our election system, I think that term limits, people are going to be less likely to want to hang on to those positions because the financial part of it, component of it, goes down. I think that if we can do something with public financing of elections and what we're doing with that policy, removing the dark money that comes in out of that, I think that might be another element that we may want to take a look at, because I equate money and power, to me now in our politics, means the same thing.
Yeah.
Well, and I also want to say that just because something hasn't been done doesn't mean that it can't be done. Right. So even though, sure, term limits have never happened, and even sure, money plays into things, I disagree with the fact that simply because it hasn't happened, simply because there have been people entrenched for so long, that they can't come out. Like, I just don't think, I think the question becomes, okay, well, how do we do that? We need to sit down and talk about it and figure out what that looks like. We can't just toss out big, grand blanket statements and say, this is what should happen. But I also don't want to go to the other side and say, it's always been like this, so let's stick with it,
I think more and more people are definitely moving away from that. They don't want to hear that anymore. Like, it's always been like that, so let's just keep doing the same thing. I mean, clearly, and this is what my point was a little bit ago, I honestly believe that regardless of what happens in terms of an election, Because I don't even like that argument. Like, oh, well, let's just wait to the election. Well, what if somebody has the ability to cheat in the election?
Right.
How do you know the election's going to be clean?
Right.
So I honestly believe that there's going to have to come a point where we amend the Constitution to address, and I'll say it, I know the Constitution, not as well as some, but better than most. The Constitution is not infallible. The Constitution is predicated on an informed, knowledgeable people that have the ability to enforce and use it properly. So what happens when you have people that just don't give a damn and they're just looking out for self-interest? They will prostitute and use the Constitution to their benefit. There are gray areas in the Constitution, including terms like abuse of power, terms like emoluments. Those things are, in essence, kind of out of date. They need to be updated. They need to be addressed in a way where you don't have a president, whether it's Donald Trump or any president, pressing the boundaries of his power, her power, without consequence. We have to do that. If we don't, every president that comes next can do everything that Donald Trump has done and more. That's a problem. I mean, that is a massive problem. So, like I said, I don't have the answer for it, but I know that if I were president and I got elected in 2020, I would go to the Congress, Republican or Democrat, and I would tell them, I am telling you right now that we need to check my power. Because if we don't, you don't know that I'll be a saint or a sinner. What you know is that absolute power corrupts absolutely, yes. If you don't check me and then I don't sign it because I'm the executive and I signed this bill into law, then who knows what you get next? And who knows what'll happen next? There's going to come a point where we need an executive that can work with the legislature to curb the power of the presidency, because everybody, and this goes to your point earlier, Liana, everybody knows that this stuff is being done. Everybody knows that every president is getting more powerful every term, and has been getting more powerful since Nixon. When does it stop? That's my point. When does that stop? If the Congress could not stop him, what the hell are we going to do? And it's not enough to just say, oh, we'll vote him out. What if there's another one that comes in and does the same damn thing? That's a problem for me. And my problems are constitutional. They're constitutional. If we don't do something to use the Constitution in good fashion and address the areas that it's gray in, then we're going to suffer going forward. And you know, when I say we're going to suffer, it isn't people in Washington, it isn't wealthy people that are going to suffer. It's the overwhelming majority or percentage of the population in this country that will suffer. They're going to be the ones that suffer. I'm with her on that. I'm with you on that too. They just.
I just think that it's going to happen, regardless of it's going to happen. We can't continue on this current trajectory that we're on because of the weight that's on it. Something's going to happen. Your generation, Liana, I think is going to be the motivating factor about how fast we change. The change is happening. It's already changing, even with our current administration now. But what is the speed and rapidness of which this change is going to happen is going to be generated off of your generation and the next generation behind that. Us two old farts. We need to get out of the way. Help as best we can, advise as best we can. But
and I'm okay with that.
I've
said it.
It's what I've been doing for the last 30 years.
I'm okay with letting her run a show. I've gone on air. Liana, you haven't been watching me like forever, but I've gone on air when we do shows. KP's probably my only witness here, but I've said openly, I don't have any fear of a woman in the White House or in positions of power. What?
I'm ready for a female president.
Maybe if we're over here, and I'll say it on air, bitching and complaining about all the things that are wrong in this country, then why not let a woman take a poke at this mess? Maybe they'll have some answers that we didn't come up with. Right. Would you agree, Liana?
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah.
So you guys are both on my campaign crew then, is that what I'm hearing?
That's like, I agree entirely. but the truth, right? I mean, seriously, that's where we're going to have to go if we don't. Yeah. So let's do this. So I did have that comment, and I think her name's Ayala. Ayala, I'll hit you up after, 1 second. I'll hit you up after we're done tonight, maybe tonight or tomorrow, and I'm interested in your take. I think she's younger, maybe your age or younger, Liana, and she had some legitimate questions. That's good, though. That's good.
Have her also look up the emoluments clause and about the president enriching themselves.
He's getting
while they're
rich.
in office.
He's getting rich right now.
I mean, and I'm not saying that the Pope fund or anything, but just have her make sure that she does her research so that she's aware of that. Because there are some.
Well, and I want to end on this important note that asking questions and exploring is a good thing. And ultimately, even if after asking those questions and having the conversation we still disagree, that's also a good thing because we want that diversity of opinion.
Correct.
Agreed.
No, I absolutely agree. Okay, so those are the two articles that were brought forward by the House. Remember, the House is just one half of the legislature. And I think this is really unique because you have three branches of government, the legislative, the executive, and the judicial. And in essence, you know, the judicial is a little more conservative and right. The executive is definitely more conservative and right, even though I've got a lot of conservative friends that don't agree with that, you know, my conservatism. But the only mechanism of government out of the three that is in Democratic hands, see there's an imbalance, is the House. And that's only one half.
That's one half.
Yeah, one half of the legislature. So in essence,
one half of
2.5 of the three branches are Republican.
Oh, it's less than that. If you do the math, what's half of 33?
No, what I'm saying is there's three branches.
Got you.
Of the three.
So that's 33, 33, 33.
One half.
Of 33.
Of one.
So it'd be 18%?
If you want to do a percentage, yeah. If you want to do a percentage.
Yeah, you didn't take math. You're a history guy, huh?
I'm a history guy. Well, I could do math, but I don't think that way. Not first, Freddie. So that branch, I mean, I'm still staggered by it. I got to tell you, I am absolutely staggered that the Senate, I don't do this often because I like being serious and lawyerly when it comes to these items and issues because they matter and they're damn important to me. It's a constitution. But when they said, or at least John Roberts said in the trial, this is the greatest deliberative body on the planet. For the first time in my life, I wanted to laugh. I did. I wanted to laugh because it's no longer the greatest deliberative body on the planet. And it's an evidence that it is not. So it hurt me to have to admit to that, but it is a fact because as a young person was just pointing out, everybody knew that it wasn't going to be a trial. It was a joke. And we knew it before it began. So my point ultimately is I'm still in shock and awe of the fact that one half of one branch of government literally gave their power away. Gave their power away out of self-interest. I've never seen that. Definitely not in this country. I've never seen that happen at that level.
But see, here's the thing. I would push back and say, honestly, this might sound really cynical, but everybody in there is giving away their power based on self-interest right now. So
correct. Yeah,
do
no
with that what you will.
No disagreement. But did it? Maybe the difference is like, did it? I mean, here's the thing. I don't want to get too cheesy about this, but it hurt me. I mean, fundamentally, to my core, it hurt me that as I watched, I knew that we are no longer the country that we were, and that I believe in. We're not that anymore, and it hurt me. And I sound kind of candy, but it still bothers the hell out of me. Is what I'm saying. It bothered the hell out of me that our country, and I'll get a little too much here, but James Madison at Princeton, when it was still the College of New Jersey, learning about Montesquieu, Locke, Hobbes, and the concept of divided government and separation of powers, all of that, hundreds of years of intellectual work, gone now. It's gone, and that bothers me. You're right. I don't think math. I think history, and I think relevance going forward, and I think of social scientists, and I think of people, and how this is going to affect us going forward. Now, I'm going off a little bit too much, but I think you guys get my point. It is a significant period. I think people are trying to gloss it over. It's not that big a deal. It is a big damn deal.
It is huge.
It is the biggest deal I've ever seen in my life. And it is the biggest deal for me historically as a history teacher. It bothered hell me. So I'm interested, like, I'm not trying to throw it on you, but I mean, where do you feel for your age, younger or whatever? How does it bother you as much, or are you more cynical about it now because of what you've grown up with? Because either way, it's illustrative.
Does this particular impeachment bother me as much? Is that what you're asking me?
I'm asking if watching what happened and knowing what it's going to be in advance, if that worries you about our Constitution and where we go as a country.
I don't feel like this is I feel like this has been happening for a long time. I don't feel like this is a new thing. I feel like, again, going back to what I was saying initially.
You've grown up with it.
My generation is extremely disillusioned with politicians, with political parties, with politics altogether. Not in the sense that we don't believe in the fact that we need a system to govern our country. We do need that. However, we are extremely disillusioned with how it's being done.
Right.
And so that being said, it's not like I'm sitting here, rending my clothes and putting on sackcloth, kind of a thing, because to me it's a big issue, sure. But I think it's par for the course. It's what's been happening. Hence why I am of the opinion that we just need a pretty substantial overhaul altogether. It's not just,
which is where I'm
it's
going.
not just
Yeah.
this moment.
Right. Good last thoughts, because we're kind of wrapping up. Last thoughts, Darren?
No, I agree. I agree with what Leanna's saying again. The question I would have, though, is that ultimately the plan is to disillusion the younger generation, which is upcoming, which is going to be, the baby boomers was the largest. It skips right over the X and Ys, which is my generation. Now the millennials, and what comes behind them. Is that ultimately the plan? Is to keep the younger voters, the new wave of voters coming in, disillusioned, turned off to the system. They don't participate, so that old guard is able to hang on to that.
Let me make a caveat here.
A little bit longer.
I'm not saying we don't participate. I'm saying, yeah, we need to participate. But what I'm saying is I think our approach is different. I think we want to look at big picture and figure out how to get to that big picture, as opposed to looking at, well, here are all of our details that we're living in right now. So how do we work within these details? If that makes sense.
It does.
It's a shift
Right.
in how we're approaching the issue altogether.
Right. Last thoughts, either of you, on the impeachment, in final?
What?
I thought you were going to say he got away with
Yeah,
it.
he did. I'm going to say it a little bit better than that.
He got away with it.
He was accused of doing, he did.
And he admitted it.
ultimately-
And he admitted it.
He and others have admitted it. And he has not been held accountable for it. So what is the accountability that goes along with doing wrong? That's what my question is. And at some point in time, he's going to be held accountable. I just don't know what exactly it is. And that's the part that really concerns me.
I'm not, wrapping up, I'm never like pessimistic in advance and up front. But, as I just mentioned earlier, I'm generally and like serious concern to my core right now, more than I've ever been. I mean, I grew up on stories and beliefs and principles, and I may have shared with you, Liana, I don't know. I know I've shared with Darren. My family's going into its fifth generation of service in infantry, not other, but infantry. We go to get killed if necessary. Why do we do that? Not because we can't do other things, not because we're not smart, intellectual, capable, or have ability, but because we believe in the damn country. We believe in a constitution. We believe in principle. We believe in a separation of powers. We believe that if you grow up in this country, your work, your talent, your ability, your drive, your hunger is what gives you the ability to go all the way, become president, make money, be successful. I actually believe that. But I have to admit that over a number of years now, and to your point earlier, Liana, this isn't overnight. I'm well aware of that. This isn't overnight. This has been going on. This is literally the culmination of a lot of years of ugly for me that I've been witnessing and watching. And I am concerned. I remember vividly telling people, that there were no damn weapons of mass destruction. I told people, that's garbage. There are no weapons of mass destruction. Those guys cannot hurt us over here. But we went along with it.
Fear.
People did it out of fear. And I was like a fool. I was telling people, that's wrong. People looked at, I lost friends because I told people there were no weapons of mass destruction and that the Iraqi people and the people in the Middle East could hurt us. I said, no, they can hurt us in other fashions after 9/11, but they couldn't do us damage like on a military level in a typical symmetric warfare. They couldn't. So I'm going back to that. So this is to your point. It is over time that this has all been taking place. Okay, so I don't think it was overnight that I've gotten to where I am right here, right now, here and here. But I do have a problem because I honestly, and this is to your question, there are no repercussions. There are no consequences. And I do have a problem with that. That I grew up in a country where I believed that I had to do what was right, that if I turned the corner and there was a cop there, that I actually got afraid and I was like, oh man, I'm gonna get in trouble. That stuff worries me. And I do have more and more of my young guys that I coach or that I teach, they're concerned. They're like, what the hell, coach? I mean, you could do whatever the hell you want if you're rich or if you have the money, if you got the power. And so what do I say to that? They're correct. They're right. They're correct. We don't have the answer. So I don't either. But I think I've said it already. If I were president, I would willingly walk into the Congress and I would say, let us begin an honest discussion about the rules going forward on how we check an unchecked executive and how we stop the presidency from gaining more power. A reminder to the audience, by the way, the first branch of government was the legislature. And they were concerned with creating the executive. They didn't want a king. They had just revolted to move an autocrat, King George, out of the way. That's why we fought a damn revolution. We rebelled because we did not want someone who was above the law and can do whatever the hell they wanted to us. And 243 years later, here we go. We're giving back power that should be and rest with the people's house and the legislature. The 535 people in the legislative branch that should be, as a whole, more powerful in checks, definitely than the president. So that's kind of my issue, my problem, I guess, that I'm gonna have to deal with. But those are the concerns I think we have going forward. So let's do this. So we're gonna wrap up for tonight. We will be back. I think we're good for next week, Sunday. Maybe Darren, maybe Liana, we'll figure it out. But the political roundtable will be up and again this coming Sunday from now on. And we're gonna continue to have meaningful, substantive discussion on issues that present and how we go forward. So this week was more about impeachment. Next week, I think we'll do a format where it's touching on more than one topic, not just one singular topic, but we needed to do that and we needed to kind of lay a foundation for how we go forward with the show. So I want to thank both of you for being here. I appreciate your time and your energy on a Sunday afternoon. As I go home, watch the Oscars, and I get ready to get my win against her. We got a bet going. We got a bet.
What's the bet?
Who gets the most Oscar wins? Who gets the most picks? We'll see. I'm worried.
Tell me about it next week, because I'm not watching.
Yeah, I am worried because she knows her business. She knows her business. But so to you guys out there, big thank you again. You know the format now. Sunday afternoon, SuperMex Political Roundtable with a variety of faces and a variety of people that are going to bring you information. It's not always going to be the same. It might be a little different depending on the topic, but you're going to get honesty here. As a matter of fact, we don't go on air unless you sign an honesty disclosure. Make you guys sign it. So, yeah, so we'll be back next week, roughly around the same time. I'll let you guys know. Let's do this for housekeeping. Okay, so if you're new, you need to go to SuperMex International on YouTube. It's real easy. Go to YouTube, punch in SuperMex International. You can download or you can watch and view all of our content. And it's not just political. It's Liana and I did an Oscar special yesterday. So it's cultural, it's social, because that is the human experience, the American tapestry. It's not just political, it's everything. It's everything. So go to YouTube, punch in SuperMex International, subscribe and check out our videos, and I'm going to begin putting out more. And also go to Facebook, look up SuperMex Nation or SuperMex International. Try to become a member, friend me, and then get into the group, because the group is where I give out prizes and awards for being a part of our discussion and being a part of our membership. I do quite a bit in that fashion, so love to have you. So SuperMex International on YouTube, and SuperMex Nation or SuperMex International also on Facebook. Become a part of what we're doing. So again, thanks to Liana and thanks to Darren for being here with me, and most importantly, thank you guys for giving me some of your Sunday afternoon. I will give a special shout out to my dog KP over there. He's doing dirty work. Always doing the dirty work. We'll see. Liana, we should have gave KP some picks. He probably would have beat us both. That would have been a problem.
He probably would have.
Yeah, he probably would have.
Well, it's not too late for him. He could.
Uh-oh, submit the picks. Now, he might be watching right now. I don't know. Okay, so that's show for tonight. Thank you guys again. We'll be back next Sunday. If you have any questions, go ahead and hit me up on Facebook. I'd love to talk to you. If you're serious and you genuinely have a concern, or you want to know, you want to be informed, I will give you the time to sit and talk with you to help you make your decisions. I don't tell people what to do. I give my piece, I give what I believe, and then it's up to you ultimately to make your own good decision for yourself. We don't do that hypocrisy thing here.
Well, and again, just tying back to this idea that multiple viewpoints are a good thing. So listening to, Rich's thoughts or Darren's or mine, you shouldn't base your thoughts on ours. You should take the information, assimilate it, and then ultimately make your choice based on what you think is most educated.
Question. Keep questioning people. Keep questioning and asking more questions. That's the best way to inform yourself. Okay, that's it for us tonight. Thank you for joining us. We are out.